Hey, I'm talking to you. The voice cut across the heat like a thrown wrench. You don't just stroll onto my FOB like it's a farmer's market, sweetheart. This is a controlled access point. You're gonna turn around, walk back to that holding pen, and wait for somebody to come babysit you. A hand closed around her upper arm, hard. It yanked her back toward the chain link. I said, let's go. She did not flinch. The grip ground into the muscle above her elbow, and she let it. The way you let a current carry a boot when fighting it would only cost you air. The man holding her was a Marine sergeant, mid-20s, sunglasses pushed up into a high and tight, thumbs hooked behind a plate carrier he wore like a costume. His name tape read, Conlon. Behind him, the entry control point baked. Gray HESCO barriers stacked 12 feet, a blast wall, a vehicle search lane, a pedestrian turnstile, and beyond all of it, 300 meters inside the wire, a helicopter sat cooling on the pad with its rotors drooping in the still air. She had been held harder, by worse, in worse places. The heat came off the HESCO in sheets, diesel and dust, and the cooking oil reek of a chow hall somewhere behind the wire. A generator hammered. A flag snapped on its halyard. 100 meters out, a fuel bladder sat fat and unattended in exactly the spot where she would never have allowed a fuel bladder to sit. And she filed that too, the way she filed everything, without a flicker reaching her face. Conlon was still talking. Men like Conlon were always still talking. We get all kinds out here, he said. To her, to the gate, to the warm air. Aid workers, reporters, contractors who think the rules are for other people. And every single one of them thinks they're special until they meet me. He let her arm go at last, but slowly, like a man setting down a trophy he wanted seen. Welcome to my gate. She rolled the shoulder once, settling the joint where his grip had bruised it, and looked at him the way a range officer looks at a muzzle that has just swept across the line. Not angry, only noting. Then she turned her head and looked at the hand he had taken off her arm, then at the gap between the guard shack and the wall where no camera pointed, then at the corner of the wire where the concertina sagged and a man could be through in 9 seconds. She cataloged all of it before she ever looked at his face. Your name, Sergeant, she said. Conlon laughed and turned to the 2 junior Marines by the shack. My name. That's cute. You hear that? She wants my name. He squeezed once more, for show, then walked her by the arm toward the holding pen, a 4x4 cage of chain link with a plywood bench, where the gate parked the lost and the unbadged. Tell you what, you can have my name after you sit down and learn how a gate works. In the doorway of the guard shack stood another Marine, older, a gunnery sergeant with a coffee in his fist and 20 years in his face. Thorne. He was not watching the argument. He was watching her. The way she had stood when she was grabbed. Square, rooted, weight already distributed. No recoil. The way her eyes had moved before her mouth did. He had spent 2 decades learning how people stand when they are afraid, and she was not standing like that. Something old turned over at the back of his memory and did not surface. He said nothing. The youngest Marine on the gate, a lance corporal named Boland, 19 and sweating through his blouse, broke a bottle of water out of a cooler and held it toward the cage. Ma'am, it's 104 out here. You should... She's fine, Conlon said without looking. Park it, tourist. Somebody'll get to you when they get to you. She sat. She set the small canvas grip bag on her knees and folded her hands on top of it. Her watch was turned inward, the face against the soft of her wrist, the way men wear them when they don't want a glint to give a position away. She looked once, briefly, at the helicopter on the pad. Then she looked at nothing and waited, calm as still water in a sealed canteen. Out at the pad, a crew chief in a flight suit was standing under the rotor disc with a radio to his mouth, asking the tower a question he did not like the answer to. The question was who had just walked off that aircraft alone and on foot toward the main gate. The tower did not know. The crew chief keyed the net again and asked someone to find out fast. There had been a security detail on that aircraft. There was always a security detail on that aircraft. But the general had a way of moving faster than the people assigned to protect her, of stepping off a ramp while the detail was still unstrapping and being 200 meters gone before anyone realized the principal had walked. And the detail's senior man was at that moment standing on the helipad with his weapon slung and his hand pressed flat to his forehead, looking at an empty access road and beginning to understand that his 3-star had gone to inspect the front gate, the way she inspected everything. Alone, unannounced, and exactly as it really was. Inside the cage, the woman in the rankless uniform sat with her hands folded on a canvas bag, and the man who had grabbed her told his guard force she'd be gone by lunch, and not one of them yet understood that the morning had already turned, quietly, the way a tide turns, all at once and far out, long before anybody standing on the beach can see the water start to move. The convoy came in at 10:00 and stacked up wrong. A contracted fuel truck rolled to the search lane with a placard that didn't match its manifest, and Conlon made a production of it. Out into the lane, hand up, voice climbing, a Marine with a mirror pole standing flat-footed in the worst place a man can stand near a vehicle that might be more than a vehicle. From the cage, she watched the geometry of it, the way other people watch weather. The standoff distance, the undercarriage nobody had cleared, the single rifle pointed at the dirt instead of the threat. "You don't have your paperwork. You don't come on my FOB," Conlon was shouting at the driver, a thin local man with both hands raised. "I don't care who you haul fuel for. You think I won't turn the whole convoy around? Try me." "Annex C, paragraph 4, the woman in the cage said. She did not raise her voice. She did not have to. It carried because it was flat and certain and shaped like a fact. Standoff is 30 meters, not the lane. Your man standing in it. A beat. Force protection conditions Bravo. Under Bravo, you don't run a no-match placard through the lane. You push it to the inspection bay, and you clear the undercarriage before anyone gets within 10 of it. Annex C, paragraph 4, subparagraph 2. You're inside your own 30 meters, Sergeant, and so is he." She had not moved on the bench. She had not pointed. She had simply recited the gate's own standing orders back to the man who was supposed to enforce them, by paragraph, in order. The way a person recites something they have read so many times, the words have become furniture. The fuel driver looked from her to Conlon and back, and even he understood, in a language he barely spoke, that the woman in the cage knew this gate better than the man running it. Conlon turned. Slow. The way a man turns when something has gotten under the door he thought he'd locked. "Did I ask you? Did anybody ask the contractor in the cage for a safety brief?" "You're welcome," she said, and looked back at the truck. In the doorway of the shack, Gunnery Sergeant Thorne set his coffee down on the plywood ledge and did not pick it back up. Contractors did not quote Annex C. Contractors did not know there was an Annex C. He stepped inside, found Boland at the log terminal, and put a hand on the back of the kid's chair. "Who checked her in?" Thorne said quietly. "Who escorted her? Where'd her bird come from?" Boland blinked. "Nobody, Gunny. She just walked up. Conlon grabbed her before she even got to the turnstile. Pull the morning flight log. The arrivals." Thorne's voice dropped under the hum of the air conditioner. "Don't tell Conlon." Boland's hands hovered over the keys. "Conlon said not to touch the arrivals without him." "I'm telling you to touch them," Thorne said. "And I'm a gunnery sergeant, and he's a sergeant, and that's the end of the math. Pull it." Boland pulled it. The screen filled with the day's rotary wing traffic. Most lines were routine. Resupply, a medevac repositioning, a pair of birds shuttling staff. One line wasn't. 0840. Rotary wing arrival. Point of origin redacted. Manifest classified. Passenger names withheld. The kind of line that did not happen at a gate fob unless someone very far up the chain wanted to land somewhere without being announced. Thorne read it 3 times. Then he looked out the window at the cage, at the woman sitting with her hands folded on a canvas bag, her watch turned in, and felt the old thing at the back of his memory move another inch toward the surface. Out in the cage, she had stopped watching the truck. She was watching the time. Every few minutes her eyes touched the inward-turned watch and came away, and she filed the number wherever she filed numbers. She was not waiting to be rescued. She had never once in her life waited to be rescued. She was taking notes. The convoy mishandled, the standoff blown, the laborers yet to come, the time on each. Building the same patient record she had once built, with a radio handset slick in her fist, and the whole world coming apart around a wire. The cage was new, the discipline was not. Inside the shack, Thorne stood holding a printout he wished he hadn't read, and slowly, turned to look again at the line that said, "No names." By 1100 she had a nickname. "The Tourist," Conlon called her, and because he was the loudest man at the gate, it stuck. Off-duty Marines drifting through for chow heard it and grinned. Somebody took a photo. Somebody asked through the chain link whether she was lost, whether she wanted a map, whether she was press, whether she knew this was a real war and not a ride. She answered nothing she did not have to answer. The few words she spent like a sniper spends rounds. "Hey, take a picture with the Tourist," Conlon said, throwing an arm around a passing corporal. "She's been on the FOB a whole hour, and she's already an expert on Annex C." "I'll wait," the woman said. A staff sergeant from another section stopped on his way to chow, leaned on the chain link, and asked her, grinning, whether she'd gotten the full tour yet. A corporal asked if she wanted him to call her a taxi. The gate laughed, the easy laugh of men who are certain the joke is safe because the person it lands on cannot answer it. She gave them the same thing she had given Conlon, a stillness so complete it began, in some of them, to itch. One of the younger Marines stopped laughing first. He could not have said why. Something about the way she sat, hands folded, watch turned in, taking the whole gate apart with her eyes, while her face gave back nothing at all. Boland came back to the cage with another bottle of water. This time Conlon let it go, but he turned to the terminal and logged it, 2 fingers stabbing the keys. LCPL Boland, fraternizing with detained Cividiocanta. The kid handed the bottle through the wire and could not meet her eyes. "Thank you, Boland," she said. She had read his name tape. She used his name. It was, she would have noted if she noted such things, the first decent thing that had happened at this gate. Then the laborers came. A dozen local National Day workers filed up to the pedestrian lane for site work inside the wire, badges out, hands open, the posture of men who have learned exactly how still to be at an American gate. Conlon worked them over. He made one of them empty his pockets twice. He took something from a second man's bag and did not write it down, and did not give it back. And he made a third stand in the full sun against the Hesco, with his arms out, while the line backed up behind him for no reason anyone could name. In the cage, the woman went very still. Not the stillness of fear, and not the stillness of patience. A third kind. Her face did not move, but something behind it shifted, and Thorne, watching from the shack, saw it happen and understood it without having a word for it. It was not anger. It was inventory. She was writing it all down. The pockets, the bag, the man in the sun, the time. Adding it to a ledger that was getting longer, and would, when it was opened, be very hard to close. She knew this kind of man, not Conlon specifically. She had never met Conlon. But the kind who mistook a gate for a kingdom and a uniform for a license, who learned that the people who came through his lane could not push back and built a small, cruel economy on top of that fact. She had spent the back half of a career finding men like him at the bottom of investigations that started somewhere else entirely. A missing pallet, a complaint that went quiet, a soldier who transferred out and wouldn't say why. They were never the headline. They were always in the file. And the thing about a man who runs a quiet racket at a gate, she had learned, is that he keeps doing it precisely because no one above him ever stands in his line. So she sat in his line. She let him show her everything. And she filed it. The laborer's emptied pockets, and the unlogged item, and the small, sunburned humiliation of a man who only wanted to come to work, against the day the file would open. If watching the wrong man wear the uniform like a weapon makes something tighten behind your ribs, if you have ever stood in a line and gone still in that third way, because going still was the only move left, then you already understand this story. And you should subscribe to Honor Tales, because the people who get underestimated here always get their moment. Conlon clapped his hands and told the gate she'd be gone by lunch. He believed it. He had no reason not to. 300 meters inside the wire, in a plywood command post, a sergeant major set a phone down very carefully and turned to the duty officer. "The task force commander's aircraft has been on deck 90 minutes, he said. "The PSD's still on it. Nobody can find the general." He looked at the duty officer. "Find the general." Conlon stopped bullying her around 11:30. That was when he started building the paperwork, which was worse. He sat at the log terminal and rewrote the morning. His fingers moved fast and certain. He backdated the first entry, erased the grab, and recast the whole thing. Unescorted Civ female attempted unauthorized entry, pedestrian lane, refused verbal commands, detained per ECP SOP, no incident. He read it over, nodded, and sent it to print. "Here's how the morning went," he announced to the shack, pulling the warm page off the printer. "She came at the lane, refused commands. I detained her clean. Everybody initials it. Boland, you witnessed." Boland looked at the page, then at the window, where the woman sat in the cage with her watch turned in and her bag squared on her knees, scanning the search lane in the same slow operational sweep she had been running all morning, sterile as a swept room. "Sergeant," Boland said, That's not what I saw." "You saw what I saw, Boland." Conlon held the pen out. "Initial it." You grabbed her arm before she— "Initial it, Lance Corporal." Thorne stepped between them and took the page out of Conlon's hand. "Stand down on the paperwork, Conlon. Wait for the watch officer." "It's my lane, Gunny." Conlon took the page back, not gently. "My lane. My call. You want to stand a gate? Stand it. Don't run mine." Thorne looked at him for a long moment, and something in his face closed like a hatch. He stepped back. He had given the man the chance. He filed that too. Conlon walked the page out to the cage. "Good news, tourist. You're officially a security incident now. Attempted entry. The provost marshal's gonna come deal with you, and your bag here." He reached through the gate and pulled the canvas grip off her knees. "Is getting searched. Procedure." She let him take it. She watched him take it the way you watch a man pick up a thing that is going to be evidence against him, with a patience that should have frightened him, and didn't. Inside the bag was nothing that would tell him anything. A change of socks, a liter of water, a field notebook with a green cover, the pages dense with a small, hard hand, a phone he could not open. No identification, no rank, no orders. A senior officer who had spent 20 years moving quietly through dangerous places had long ago learned to travel as a closed door, to carry nothing that announced her, to wear a watch turned in, to be on first read exactly nobody. It was a habit that had kept her alive in 3 countries. This morning, It was the habit that let Conlon believe what he wanted to believe. And she did nothing to disturb the belief, because the belief was the rope, and he was the one tying it. "You should keep that log exactly as it is," she said. Conlon snorted. "That a threat, tourist?" "It's advice." He laughed and carried her bag and his forged page off toward the shack, pleased with himself, a man who thought he had just closed a file. Behind him, Thorne keyed the radio low, turned his back to the lane, and spoke into it. "Command post, main gate. I need the FOB commander down here. Main ECP. Now, if he's reachable." A pause, a crackle. "Tell him it's about the 0840 arrival." He set the handset down and looked out at the woman in the cage, and the thing at the back of his memory finally began to climb. Thorne pulled Conlon behind the shack where the guard force couldn't hear. "Undo the log," he said. "Walk it back. Apologize to her before the watch officer gets here, and you might keep your stripes." "You're soft, Gunny." Conlon was grinning, but there was sweat on it now. "She's nobody. No badge, no escort, no rank. She's a lost contractor or a reporter who wandered off the press tour, and I caught her. And that's the whole story." "I've stood 100 gates." Thorne's voice was very quiet. "People who've been shot at stand a certain way. They hold still when you put hands on them, because moving costs them options, and they've learned to keep their options. She stands that way. Whatever you think you caught, you didn't. Walk it back." "She's nobody," Conlon said again, and walked off to lunch, because saying it twice made it feel true. Thorne watched him go and felt the particular tiredness of a man who has offered another man the last clean exit, and watched him refuse it. He had done his part. He had said the words plainly, with no audience, in a way that cost Conlon nothing to accept. There was a version of this morning in which the sergeant walked it back, apologized, kept his stripes, and learned something. That version was gone now, walked off toward the chow hall on the legs of a man too certain to be saved. Whatever happened next, Thorne knew, would be a thing Conlon had chosen, with both eyes open and a senior Marine telling him not to. That mattered. Later, when people asked how it could have gone so far, that would matter. Thorne went back into the shack alone and stood over the flight log, and the memory came all the way up at last. Autumn, 2006, Diyala. He had been 20 years old, a lance corporal flat in the dirt on a rooftop, 2 ridge lines from a little combat outpost that everybody on the company net said was going to fall before dawn. The night had come apart into mortars and tracer and a ground push on a south wire that wouldn't hold. And through all of it, there had been a voice on the radio. A woman's voice, flat and certain and shaped like a fact, calling close air danger close, refusing to give up the wire, telling everyone on the push to hold. Nobody leaves the wire. Say again, my mark. He had lain in the dirt and listened to that voice refuse to die, and the outpost had not fallen, and he had never seen her face. But he had never forgotten the call sign she answered to. He looked out the window at the woman in the cage, at the way she stood when she was grabbed, at Annex C from memory, at the bird with no names. He went out to the gate. He stopped at the chain link, and he asked it carefully, formally, not to expose her, just to be sure. "Ma'am." His throat was dry. "Diyala. Autumn of 2006. Were you there?" For a long moment she said nothing. The search lane went on behind her, the convoy grinding through, the heat pressing down. Then she lifted her eyes from the lane and met his, and the certainty in them was 20 years deep. "I was there," she said. Thorne felt the rooftop come back up through his boots, the grit of it, the cold that comes in the desert after midnight, the way the tracer had drawn flat orange lines toward a horseshoe of Hesco that everyone on the net swore was finished. He had been a boy. He had believed he was going to listen to an American outpost, die over the radio. And instead, he had listened to a voice refuse to let it. 30 words at a time. Hold the wire. Nobody leaves the wire. My mark. Until the sun came up and the wire was still there. He had carried that voice for 2 decades, the way you carry the thing that taught you what the job was actually for. He had never put a face to it. He had never needed to. He had only needed to know it was real. "It was you," he said. It was not a question this time. She held his eyes a moment longer and did not deny it, which from her was the same as yes. Thorne stood up a little straighter than he had in years. He went back into the shack and keyed the radio a second time, and this time there was steel in it. "Command post, main gate. Get the colonel to the ECP immediately, not when he's free. Now." If you want to know what a 20-year-old Marine heard on a radio that night, and why a gunnery sergeant just went pale at a gate over a woman in a cage, then stay with this one and subscribe to Honor Tales, because this channel never leaves a call sign unanswered. Out at his lane, Conlon came back from chow, saw Thorne on the radio, and sneered, and understood nothing at all. She was 33 years old, and the South Wire was coming apart, and the only thing she had left was her voice. Captain Claire Ashford commanded a military police company holding a combat outpost on a contested road outside Bakba, in Diyala province, in the autumn of 2006. The outpost was a horseshoe of Hesco, and a single strand of road, and 90-odd soldiers. And the people who wanted it gone came after midnight the way they always did, mortars first, walking them in, and then a ground assault on the South Wire where the ground gave them the best approach. Half her radios went down in the first 10 minutes. The generator took a fragment, and the floodlights died. The night became muzzle flash, and the smell of cordite, and the particular sound a wire makes when too many men are pushing on it at once. She did not stay in the operations center. She walked the line. She had thought about it for exactly 1 second. The way you think about every option in the first second, and then never again. The book said the commander stays at the radios where she can see the whole fight. But half the radios were dead, and the floodlights were gone, and the whole fight had narrowed to 140 meters of South Wire that was about to fail. And a fight that small is not commanded from a map. It is commanded from the dirt. So she clipped the surviving radio to her vest, and she left the operations center, and she went to where the wire was breaking. She moved down the inside of the wire under fire, low and fast, and she put steel where the push was heaviest. She pulled 2 soldiers off a quiet sector and pushed them south. She redistributed ammunition by hand, dragging green cans through the dirt to the positions burning through it fastest. And she got on the company net, because the company net was the one thing still working, and she held the outpost together with 30 words at a time. "Hold the wire," she said into the handset, flat, certain. "Nobody leaves the wire." Say again. "Close air, danger close." My mark. 2 ridgelines away, a 20-year-old Marine lay in the dirt and listened to that voice and believed it, because it was impossible not to. At the South Wire, a young soldier named Specialist Andre Bishop went down at the breach with a round through the gut. He was 24 years old. The aid station was 400 meters back across open ground, and there was no vehicle, and there was no one to spare. She handed off the net, and she picked him up, and she carried him. 400 meters across open ground, in the dark, with the wire screaming behind her. She got him to the aid station alive, and then she turned around and went back, because the wire was still her wire. Sergeant Trace Mallory held the far corner so she could go back. He was 27, and his call sign was Copperhead, and he was the kind of non-commissioned officer who simply stayed where the line was thinnest because someone had to. He held the corner through the worst of it, and the corner held, and the outpost did not fall. When the relief column ground up the road at first light, The south wire was bent but unbroken, and Bishop was breathing. It had taken 7 hours. 7 hours of moving up and down the inside of a wire that wanted to come apart, of voice and ammunition and close air walked in danger close at her own mark, of carrying one man 400 meters and going back for the rest. She did not remember most of it as a sequence. She remembered it as weight. The weight of the radio, the weight of Bishop on her shoulder, the weight of a decision made every 90 seconds about where the next 2 soldiers had to go. By dawn, her voice was a ruin, and her hands would not fully open, and the wire was still the wire. That was the only sentence that mattered. The wire was still the wire. Mallory's position was gone. He was not in it. He was not anywhere. The ground that had given way and then been retaken did not give him back. Not that morning, and not in the weeks of searching after. And his name went onto a wall with a date, and no grave beneath it. They gave Captain Ashford the Silver Star for that night, and the call sign followed her out of Diyala and up through 20 years of command. Battalion, then brigade, then a star, then another, then a third, until they handed her an entire theater and every soldier, sailor, airman, and marine in it. She had stood on a wire when she was 33, so that other people would not have to. She had never really stopped. This morning, the wire had been a gate, and a sergeant had told her to sit in a cage, and 300 meters away, a relief column was, once again, already on its way. And this time, it wore the eagle of a colonel and was walking the length of the FOB to reach her. Conlon decided to finish it before anyone above him arrived. He could feel the morning getting away from him. Thorne on the radio, the watch officer Dew, the woman in the cage refusing to be afraid. So he moved fast, the way men move when they're trying to outrun their own decisions. He signed the removal order on the bottom of the forged log, pressing hard enough to dent the page. Then he found Boland. "She's leaving," he said. "Walk her to the road, off the ECP. She gives you trouble. You put hands on her, and you move her. It's authorized. It's signed. It's clean. Go." Boland took the order and looked at it, and didn't move toward the cage. He saw the grab again in his memory, the hand closing on her arm before she'd reached the turnstile. He saw the water she hadn't been allowed to have. He saw the laborer standing in the sun with his arms out. He saw a log that didn't match a single thing his own eyes had recorded since 0840. He was 19 years old, and his hands were shaking, and he held the order back out toward his sergeant. "Sergeant?" "No." His voice cracked, and he said it anyway. "I'm not putting hands on her. That's not what happened this morning, and you know it isn't." "Then you're done on this gate, Lance Corporal." Conlon snatched the order back. "Get out of my way." It was the bravest thing Boland had ever done, and it did not feel brave. It felt like being 19 and terrified with his whole short career balanced on a single word. "No," said to a man who outranked him and signed his evaluations and controlled every hour of his day. He did not know that the woman in the cage had heard it. He did not know that 2 MPs and a colonel and a 3-star general were 90 seconds away, or that the refusal he had just stammered out would be the cleanest line in every statement taken that afternoon. He only knew what he had seen, and that he could not put his name to a lie about it, and that some things were worth being done on a gate for. He stepped out of his sergeant's way, and he did not pick up the order, and that, too, went into the record exactly as it happened. He went to the cage himself. He opened it, and he reached in, and he closed his hand around her arm a second time. The same arm, the same grip, and he pulled her up off the bench to march her to the road. She let him. And for the first time all morning, she smiled. It was not a warm smile, and it was not a cruel one. It was the smile of someone watching a man, with great care and considerable effort, finish digging a hole he is standing in. Now it's documented, she said. What? Conlon's hand was still on her arm. Twice, she said, with a signature. Conlon did not understand the smile. That was the thing he would turn over later, in the weeks of statements and counsel and the slow machinery closing around him, that she had smiled, and he had not understood it, and a wiser man would have let go of her arm the instant he saw it. Because a person who smiles, when you grab them a second time, is a person who knows something you don't. And the only thing more dangerous than an enemy who is afraid of you is one who is patiently waiting for you to finish. He had spent all morning reading her as nobody. He had read the bag as nobody's bag, the silence as nobody's fear, the stillness as nobody's helplessness. He had been wrong about every line of it, and the smile was the first time some animal part of him suspected as much. He let go of her arm, but a half-second too late, and a half-second is, in the end, all the difference there has ever been. Behind the blast wall, 50 meters out and closing, Colonel Glenn Renfro came around the corner at a walk that was nearly a run, his command sergeant major a half-step behind him, and the watch officer scrambling to keep up. He had been pulled out of a briefing by a gunnery sergeant's second radio call, and somewhere in the length of that long walk down the FOB's main road, looking at the line that said 0840 and no names, the colonel had begun to understand what he was about to find at his own front gate, and the understanding had put the run into his stride. Conlon's fist was closed around the arm of the most senior officer in the theater. His signature was drying on an unlawful order built on a forged log. And around the corner of the blast wall, a colonel was closing the last 50 meters with his face already gone white. Colonel Renfro rounded the blast wall, saw the hand on her arm, and stopped the morning cold. He came to attention so hard and so fast that the sound of his boots coming together cracked across the gate like a rifle bolt. Everything else stopped because he stopped. The guard force turned. Conlon turned, his hand still wrapped around her arm, his mouth already opening to explain to whoever this was that he had the situation handled. General Ashford? Renfro's voice was loud and formal and shaking very slightly at the edges. Ma'am. Then he turned his head a few degrees toward Conlon, and the temperature of his voice dropped through the floor. Sergeant, take your hand off the commander of this task force. Now. Conlon's hand opened on reflex before his mind had caught up to the words. General. Commander. Task force. The three words arrived together and would not fit through the door of what he had spent all morning believing. His face began to move. Confusion first, a small, hopeful confusion that this was a mistake, a different general, a joke. Then the confusion curdled into disbelief as Renfro did not smile, did not relent, stood at rigid attention before a woman in a rankless uniform Conlon had grabbed twice. Thorne stepped forward out of the guard force. He came to attention, and he gave her the call sign he had carried in his chest for 20 years. Lodestar, his voice was rough. Diala, 06, it was you on the net. A beat, he swallowed. Ma'am. And then it went down the line, boot by boot. The way a current finally reaches the beach, the gate came to attention. The junior Marines, the search lane team, the watch officer, the corporal who'd posed for the photo, all of them snapping to, weapons squared, eyes front. Even the local national laborers, who did not need to and were not required to, straightened against the HESCO and went still in a different way than they had been still all morning. Conlon stood alone in the middle of it, the only man at the gate not at attention, because his body had not yet caught up to what his career had just done. His face finished its cycle, confusion to disbelief, to recognition to horror, the last one settling in slow and total as he understood, fully and at once, that he had detained, mocked, falsely logged, and twice laid hands on a lieutenant general. The three-star woman who commanded every person in the theater, his own chain of command, all the way up. He had asked her to learn how a gate works. He had told her she'd be gone by lunch. He had taken her bag and forged a log and signed an order to have hands laid on her. And every single one of those things was now a fact with a timestamp, witnessed by a guard force standing at rigid attention in front of the colonel who commanded the FOB and the general who commanded the colonel. There was a particular silence to it, not the silence of a room gone quiet. The silence of a man hearing, all at once, every word he has said that morning, played back to him in a voice he can no longer pretend belonged to nobody. Conlon's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. There was nothing in the regulations, nothing in his training, nothing in the small kingdom he had built at his lane that told a man what to say in the second after he understands what he has done. Lieutenant General Claire Ashford finally moved like the rank she wore under no insignia. She rolled her shoulder once where his grip had been, squared the canvas grip bag he'd confiscated, now back in Boland's careful hands, and passed to her, onto her shoulder, and returned the colonel's courtesy with a small, precise nod. "Colonel." Her voice was the same flat, certain instrument it had been in a cage, and on a radio 20 years gone. "Relieve the sergeant. Provost Marshal to the gate." She let her eyes move, once, to the log terminal in the shack, and seized the access control log, every entry, unaltered. He was kind enough to write it all down. "Ma'am," Renfro said. He had not moved from attention. "The details inbound. They lost you off the pad. I'd have walked you up myself if I'd known you were." "That's the point of not telling you, Colonel," she said. And there was, for the first time all morning, the faintest dry warmth under the flatness of it. "A gate you announced to me is a gate I learned nothing from. This one, I learned plenty." She let her gaze travel the length of the ECP, the cage, the search lane, the laborers still pressed against the HESCO. "Get those men out of the sun and through your gate. They came here to work." 2 MPs came through the turnstile at a jog. Sergeant Wyatt Conlon was walked off his own gate in their grip, past the holding pen where he had made a lieutenant general sit in the sun for 2 hours, and the log he had forged to bury her became, at that moment, the very first page in the file that would bury him. It took 11 minutes to take apart a record it had taken him an hour to forge. The seized log showed the backdating in its own metadata, the morning's first entry written after 1100, the timestamps overwritten, the grab erased and rebuilt. Thorne gave his statement plainly. Boland gave his, voice steady now that someone with 3 stars had made the truth safe to tell. The local national laborers, asked gently, and through a careful interpreter, described the pockets emptied twice, and the bag that was taken, and the man left standing in the sun, and one of them produced a phone with a photo of it, time-stamped. 2 other junior Marines came forward about the hazing, the logged fraternization, the things Conlon did at his gate when he thought no one above him was watching. It did not cascade so much as collapse, all at once, the way a thing collapses when the only thing holding it up was that nobody had pulled on it yet. That was the truth of men like Conlon, the truth she had learned at the bottom of a dozen files. They were never as strong as the fear they generated. The kingdom at the gate was real only as long as no one with the authority to question it ever stood in the line. And the moment one did, the moment a single person above him said, "Show me the log, show me the bag, show me what you took," the whole structure proved to have been made of nothing but other people's silence. 3 junior Marines who had been afraid of him an hour earlier discovered, almost in the same breath, that they were not afraid of him anymore. The interpreter's careful sentences and the time-stamped photo did the rest. By the time the provost marshal had the seized log open on the terminal, the only person at the gate still defending Sergeant Wyatt Conlon was Sergeant Wyatt Conlon, and he was no longer in a position to be believed. General Ashford did not watch the man taken away. She had seen enough men taken away. She turned instead to the Lance Corporal, who had refused the unlawful order. Lance Corporal Boland. He came to attention so fast, he nearly dropped the canvas bag. "Ma'am, you were the only man at this gate who saw what happened and said so, out loud, with your sergeant standing over you and your career in his hand." She looked at him the way she had once looked down a bent wire at the soldier still standing on it. "That's the whole job, Boland. Everything else is just rank." She turned to Renfro. "Colonel, I want him noted for it, on the record. And I want him on a track where he's the one teaching the next gate how it's supposed to run." "Yes, ma'am," Renfro said, and meant it. She did not stay to watch the rest. She rarely did. A commander who runs a theater learns to set a thing in motion and trust the people she leaves behind to finish it. And there were people to finish it now. A colonel who would not soon forget what he had nearly let happen at his own gate. A provost marshal with a clean log and a dozen statements. A guard force that had stood at attention for a woman in a cage and would remember every one of them. What that had felt like the next time someone came through their lane with no badge and no rank. She had not raised her voice once all morning. She did not raise it now. She had learned 20 years ago, on a wire, that the voice that holds a line is not the loudest one. It is the one that does not waver. It is the one that is still there at dawn. Thorne walked her toward the wire when it was done, toward the road that led back to the pad and the cooling bird. 20 years closed into the space of a few steps between the captain who had held a net and the Marine who was alive, because she had. "I never got to say it, ma'am." Thorne's jaw worked. "That night, I was 20 years old on a rooftop listening to you hold that wire, and I never got to say thank you. You held your corner too, Gunny." She stopped and looked at him. "Every man on a wire that night held a corner. That's why you're standing here to say it. That's the only reason any of us are." She let that sit. "Thank you for the second radio call. If you stayed for all of it, for the gate coming to attention boot by boot, for the right person finally seen, then subscribe to Honor Tales, because every story on this channel ends the same way the wire did. Holding." She walked the rest of the way alone. There was a memorial wall near the headquarters building, a modest one, plywood and brass, names and dates. The FOB zone dead, and a few carried over from older fights for soldiers who had no other wall. She found the name without looking for it, the way you find a thing your hand has known for 20 years. Sergeant Trace Mallory. A date in the autumn of 2006, no grave beneath it anywhere on Earth. She set 2 fingers below the brass, the way she always did, a count for the one the ground never gave back. Her secure phone vibrated against her hip. She almost did not look. Then she did. 3 words, from a call sign she had buried 20 years ago, a call sign that belonged to a man whose body had never been found. Lotus Star, wires still up, Copperhead, Mombasa. She looked at the name on the wall, then at the lit screen, then at her own hand, which she did not let shake. Far off across the FOB, the helicopter's rotors began, slowly, to turn. She closed the screen, and she looked once more at the brass, and then Lieutenant General Claire Ashford turned and walked back toward her aircraft with the wire, somehow, somewhere, against everything she had believed for 20 years, still up. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.